everybody. Tonight we're going to make a batch of beer called the Northern Lights. This is a kit by Best Case. It's maybe an intermediate kit. There's a little bit more work for these involved. Out of the box I've taken out some of the stuff you'll find. This is a liquid malt extract, 2 dark ones, and I believe a lighter one, or that may be a sugar. We also have some grains that we're going to steep. This is a mixture of what looks like wheat and oats. There's a grain bag that we're going to put it in. Some people complain that this produces a little bit of hair. I don't think it's a concern. Don't worry about that. There's the yeast, that'll come later. As part of the boil, we have 2 different types of hops. One's a flavoring and one's a boiling hop, so we'll see how that works a little later on. And this is the sugar, which we won't use at this stage. That's for priming. You'll just put that into your bottles to carbonate the beer. And then when you're done, you'll get to put 12 of your beers in this box. The rest of them will have to go somewhere else. So those are the ingredients. I've started by boiling 7 liters of water in this pot. It's good to get that going before you clean your gear because it can take a while. It's not going to be a boil. We're just going to take it up to 155 degrees Fahrenheit. It's good to use your candy thermometer just to keep that around. It only needs to be approximate, but sometimes it's useful to be able to monitor that. So the next step will be to wash and sanitize your gear. Some of the things you'll need to make this kit will include, just so you have your supplies, a 23-liter pail with the lid, preferably with a hole in the top. You'll need your stirring spoon, which also has a bit of a paddle on the end, can come in handy. Your fermentation lock, there's 2 pieces of that, but as long as you have that, you can put that in your hole and keep the fermentation. Candy thermometer. Heat belt can come in handy to keep the temperature stable as you go. Also, you can monitor the temperature with your pail on one of these stick-on thermometers. It's good to have a logbook to keep track of everything so you know what you're doing next time. And you'll also need a pot for your water that will hold 5 to 10 liters will probably get you by. The bigger the better because boil over can be extremely messy. Oh, and a jug of water would also come in handy. You don't want to use your tap water that's been treated with chlorine or something like that. You want to either buy some good water from the store, or if you know of a good spring, you can get some water there so you know that it's good water. This is spring water, which we'll use. Other than everything else in the kit and the directions, that should be all you need. Some sanitizing solution would also come in handy when you go to wash your equipment. Okay, so now our water has reached about 155 degrees Fahrenheit. We can see that on our thermometer. So what we have to do is steep the grains. So here we have the bag of crushed grains, which I've opened up. And you take your cheesecloth bag, get that open, and make sure there's no fuzzies coming off it anymore. You don't want those in there. When you fill this bag, a lot of dust comes out, so it might be good to do it right over the pot. It wouldn't be a big deal if a little bit of this got into there because it's all going to filter out at a later stage. Take this and try to work that down. You don't want it packed in too tightly, but it's got to be in there. So then, it's basically just like making tea. Put that in your water. You'll see some cloudy, stuff, and you can tell it's in there working good. And I like to just take this and, they say to tie the bag, but as long as you don't lose it in there, you're okay. Just tie it around your handle. You watch your temperature. You don't want it to go up above 170 degrees because that can put some strange chemicals that come from those grains into your beer that could interfere with the yeast. But basically want to just monitor your temperature and steep this for 20 minutes. Okay, so we've boiled our grains and extracted all the sugar from what's here. So now we can take this out, and the grains that are left over are just waste. So these will just go right into your compost, bag and all. First want to squeeze some of that. We get some of that good juice out of there. I guess what we should do is just, this is pretty hot, so throw that in the sink. Once it cools, you can put it in the compost and get rid. So now what we have to do is add our malt extract. And you can turn your heat up now, because the next stage we want to get this up to a boil. So we have these here. Sometimes it's tough to get everything out of them. This is where your big spoon comes in handy. Now this kit says this is a malt extract, but given how light this is, I suspect it's just some form of sugar they've used, or they've used something really light, because we're making a Canadian beer, which is a light yellow beer. And it must be a malt. If it smells like a malt, it's a malt. It's good to have this hot. Liquid can help melt some of that and get it in. That's one. I'm going to stir that and make sure it doesn't stick to the bottom. We're going to fight with this a little more to try to get some more out of it. Here's one of the darker ones. This is what they normally would look like. This is the real good stuff. Stir that as it goes in. Now, since it's a yellow beer and a lighter beer we're going to do, there's one more of these to go in. But a little trick to keep your beer lighter, it usually ends up pretty dark when you make it yourself, is to add only half of the malt at this stage. In our boil, we're going to have a 30-minute boil, and we'll add the second half near the end, just a few minutes before we do the finishing hop, which is the last 1 minute of the boil. And we'll see if that makes our beer a little bit lighter. It's January now, and we're trying to make our good summer beer, so that in 3 weeks from now we'll have that beer into the bottle. And it can sit for a few months, and when the weather gets nice, you can have a nice, light, refreshing yellow beer. So now we bring this to a boil, and once it's ready, we'll go to the next step. Okay, so now that we have our boil going, we can put in our first hop addition. So this we're going to boil for 30 minutes. So these hops are flavoring hop. And that's going to take some of the sweetness away from the malt and make it taste bitter. These are hop pellets. Little funny looking things. They're green. And we just dump this package right in. And it'll take right off. It's a great smell coming off of them. And we stir this and we watch the time. And this is a 30-minute here, but we have to remember that there's another hop addition that has to go for 1 minute at the very end. And we also have to add the other half of our malt extract somewhere in here. Remember, we're just holding it out to keep the color a little lighter, and we need it in there for the beer, but it doesn't matter when it goes in. It's got to be hot because it's thick and it must melt. So we let this sit for 30 minutes. Now the big thing here is don't let this boil over, because you'll have one awful mess on your hands if you do, and then you're losing your beer. And you also don't want to scorch it and let it burn to the bottom. So if your stove's good and hot, then you've got to watch that. Okay, we're about 10 minutes into this boil, and I'll just give you a little look at what's going on in there. Should be a real nice smell, and it should be a dark green And you'll see some nice sludge build up on the sides. Just want to keep giving it a little stir. And we wait. So I've just added, as you've seen, the second half of the malt extract. I did that at 10 minutes remaining on the boil, so we have 1 minute left in this boil. We're going to put our finish hops in. These don't add a whole lot of bitter, but they're just the final hop flavor in your beer. So a lot of the hop flavor from the boiling hops boils off through that time and just mellows out the malt. So we get into this. They look the same. Sometimes they're different type of hops. I think these ones are all the same ones. So add these in, and you just want to time them and have them in for 1 minute. At that point you can take it off. Stir that up. Watch the clock. So we've waited a minute on our finishing hop, and now our wort is done. This is our wort, and the major challenge a lot of the time is to cool this wort. We can't pitch our yeast in until it's below 28 degrees. So we've got this hot wort in the stove, and normally there's a few ways you can do it. You can fill the sink with ice and then put your pot in the ice and cool it down that way. This way, what we'll do, since we're making a Canadian ale called the Northern Lights, I just got a bucket full of snow and put that in a tin. And then we'll just put a few liters of cold water into this bucket. Hopefully the snow here will help cool our wort down. Sometimes you've got to wait a little while, but one last stir. Pour this nice beer right in there. Don't worry about any sludge or the hops or anything like that, because when we do our secondary fermentation and when we bottle, there'll be a good bit of filtering going on. So then you just top this up to the 23 liter mark. If you've got a 23 liter pail, it's no problem. You can just take it to this lip right here. Or you can pre-measure it and mark it off. Need a little bit more water. There's about 23 liters. Doesn't really matter if you're plus or minus that a bit. So here's our temperature. We just want to watch that until we can get that down to 28 degrees. Snow might interfere a little bit there, but I can feel that's still pretty warm. I suspect this will melt all the snow. When it's ready, we'll pitch the yeast. If you have any animals running around your house like I do, you might want to cover it, even though it'll take longer for it to cool. You don't want any dog hair or cat hair to get in there. So now we wait a little bit. Okay, so now that we have it down to a low enough temperature, just want to give it a stir before we put the yeast in. Take your packet of yeast, open it up, sprinkle it on top. I like to stir it in. Don't really need to, but once the yeast is stirred in, you just put on your lid, snap it down tight. Get your fermentation lock. You have to fill this with a little bit of water. Have some water in there. Lid on it. Try to get that into the hole. It's gonna be tough. We can take it out of the cool now. Then you want to put it somewhere with a nice stable temperature. Put on your heat belt. Just go on like that. We'll keep it anywhere between 18 and 22 degrees. You'll plug that in, put it out of the way somewhere, and just watch it. We'll be back in about 5 days to do secondary fermentation.
There's nothing we're giving away. It's away from you.